Let me just open by saying thank you. I am heartened by the support that I received from you all, but it is really thanks to you. I don't know how you all do it. I really don't. I spent over 25 years taking care of patients, and but I saw my last patient in April of 2004, and at that time I thought I was going to pull all my hair out, and I'm losing most of it anyway, but thought I was going to pull all my hair out trying to take care of folks in the way that the government thought we ought to take care of them, as opposed to the way that we were trained to care for them. So for you all to 12 years later continue to be in the fight and continue to be caring for patients, I just thank you. There are folks across this land who count on you, they rely on you, they know that you are their touchstone to quality care, and I appreciate that more than I can say. So I know that there are all these forces that are trying to move you in either a bad direction from a care standpoint, or making it so that you can barely survive, survive financially. I just sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for what you're doing. We're clearly in a remarkable transition in healthcare, and in the midst of it, it just doesn't feel right at all. None of it feels right. And you've got one of the things that drove me into public service was the fact that I recognized that there were a lot of what I call non-medical people making medical decisions for my patients, and I know that frustrates you terribly. But that hasn't abated. And sadly, I want to share with you a number of specific items, but I want to touch on kind of the general sense about where healthcare is going in this country and who's making these decisions. We need to answer as a society, who's deciding what kind of health coverage and what kind of health care people receive. And if we, from my perspective, if we allow CMS and government to decide, then every single one of us lose. Not because they're bad folks. They're not bad folks. But their charge is different than yours and mine was. Your charge is to care for people. That's your responsibility. That's your charge. Their charge is to make the numbers add up. And so sometimes when those desires align, then everybody's on the same page. You know, it's all right. But in this world of finite resources and the challenges that we have, on Budget Committee Chair, $19.5 trillion in debt right now and going in the wrong direction, when things like that are overarching and pressuring everything else, then most often those goals don't align. Your desire to care for people and their desire to have the numbers add up. And when that happens, then there's a battle, and we're in the midst of that battle right now. And sadly, as you noted, most often the government wins because they've got most of the cards. And so for those of us who are trying to fight, sometimes we draw to the inside straight, but most often they prevail. And that's a problem because it hurts. I believe it hurts you. Certainly it hurts you from a professional standpoint, but it hurts patients. Patients are being compromised right now in their care because of what the government is doing. And that's a story that needs to get out there. Let me just give you my perspective now on competitive bidding. This is, again, a question of who's going to decide. You all know this well. I don't know if anybody's here from the is it Ileana group in Illinois, Danville, Illinois. 170 years they were in business. They're not here because they had to close their doors because of competitive bidding. This is craziness. This is just craziness. It just doesn't make any sense at all. So we continue to battle, we continue to fight. As was mentioned, 39% of the DME suppliers have gone out of business since this craziness started. That's not because they chose to retire. That's not because they said, okay, in 2015 and 2014 and 2016, I'm going to close my doors because I'm done doing what I wanted to do. It's because the federal government got engaged in the process and said, well, we'll pick the winners and losers. And it's just so sad. It's just so sad. So we continue to battle. We've got, as you well know, we try to get the cuts delayed come July 1. We weren't successful in doing so. There are internal battles as well. I'm happy to talk about those if you have any questions that you'd like to ask about specific items. But Senator John Thune has been just a stalwart, just a great partner on the Senate side, and we're working together to try to get a year's delay come before the end of the year. We will be in a lame duck session after the election because we've funded the government through December 9th, and so we've got to figure out how to fund it beyond that time. And in that bill, or in a companion bill, there will be some healthcare issues, and we're looking to make this one of them. CRT, the complex rehab technology, obviously, if orthopedists know anything, it's that the ability of your industry to allow for the independent mobility of folks out there is incredible. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And what's occurred in the CRT arena over the past 10 to 15 years it's astounding to provide folks with independence, a much higher quality of life. And then you got the government coming along and saying, oh, by the way, we think you ought to suffer under the same umbrella as everybody else. And so we pushed that off through the end of this year, as you know, and we're working on trying to make certain that it doesn't come under competitive bidding after the first of the year. Lee Zeldin from New York, some of you are from the New York area. Lee Zeldin has got a bill that would make the exemption indefinite, which is a good thing. I don't know that has a prayer because of finances, the cost that is perceived from the Congressional Budget Office on that. But we're going to work as hard as we can to make sure that we get a delay for the next year. But look, these issues are all up in the air. I am not remarkably optimistic because, again, the battle is those who believe that their numbers need to add up is more important than patient care. The audits, how y'all doing on the audits? Everybody well? Who's under an audit right now? How long y'all been waiting?
At the data level, 2.5 years.
2.5 years, there you go. That's a pretty nice thing.
We've got a hearing in January that started in 2012.
That'll be 5 years. 3 to 5 years, they say, is the average, and which means there's some folks who are outliers in that. Look, I'm here to tell you that if your appeal process lasts that long, then it's not a fair process. It is not a fair process. Shoot, your patients are dead, right? This is ridiculousness. So what we need to do is to, I believe, have a timeline that if the federal government can't get their act together and can't move through the process, then it is decided in your favor after a finite period of time. For me, that would be 6 months, but after a finite period of time. You can't continue to have this go on and on and on and be over your head and over your patient's heads. It simply doesn't work. George Holding has a bill that that's trying to address it. I don't know that it goes far enough, but it moves it in a better direction. There's some bills out there though that would support the craziness that's going on. So we're pushing on all fronts. The pre-claim review, this is again the brilliant minds up there, and again they're not bad people, but they're so limited in what they know about how patients are cared for in the real world. So they get in this room and they say, "Oh, I got a great idea." They make those numbers add up, and that's the goal, is to make those numbers add up. Let's make it so that if you have any requirement for utilization, that you have to get our approval first. That's what's called rationing by inconvenience. Right? And that's all it is. It's rationing by inconvenience. So the pre-claim review prior authorization is what they called it in when I was practicing medicine, or a formulary, prior approved formulary in the pharmaceutical arena. All of these things are just meant to be inconvenience for providers and patients. So and the goal is the goal of the system is that people quit. Okay, I can't do that, and then they save money. That doesn't address at all the issue of quality of life for folks. So we got HR 6226. I know y'all are helping a lot. The PUSH Act, which is the Pre-Claims Undermined Seniors Health Act. How do you like that? Pretty good, huh? Yeah. We're finally getting some bipartisan support. We've had little niduses of it before. In Iowa and the like, but we're finally getting some bipartisan support. that just seeks a 1-year delay in this. It ought to go away completely, but we would surrender right now for a 1-year delay. But remember, it's a mindset. This is a mindset about who ought to make these decisions. And so let me touch on 2 specific issues, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all may have. First, CMMI, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation, which is not, all they're innovative at is figuring out how to save money from the government standpoint. It's called the Innovation Center sometimes, but they have been very, very aggressive in determining, this came with the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. They've been given the authority in that bill to have CMS determine what kind of demonstration projects in the area of care for seniors that they want to put forward, and they believe that the Act gives them the authority to require, from a mandatory standpoint, that they can dictate to providers what to do. So what's happening out there? You likely know these things, but CJR, which is for lower extremity joint replacements, right now there's 67 or 68 geographic areas in the country where CMS is telling physicians and hospitals prospectively, before the fact, this is what you have to do because this is all we're going to pay. So what that means is that CMS is now picking the prosthesis or the mode of treatment, the method of treatment, the style of treatment, what patients are able to have prior to the injury or the challenge that they have. And the docs don't have any say about it. The patients don't have any say about it. This is an experiment. The standard of care in Western societies for experiments in the medical arena on a patient is that you get informed consent. Is that you say to the patient, this is what we're thinking about doing. This is why we think it's a better idea. Now, if you think it's okay for you to get that treatment, sign here instead of the standard treatment. There's no informed consent in this. This is the federal government coming in and telling patients and telling hospitals and others what they must do. So if you're not involved in lower extremity joint replacements, then don't worry, because they've got a Part B demonstration model, which is the pharmaceutical model, which is telling physicians and other providers in inpatient settings for 75% of the country, 75% of the country, mandatorily, this is what we'll pay for pharmaceutical services, which means this is what you can use. So if you've got cancer, if you've got huge chemotherapy costs, you're going to be using what the federal government says you have to use. If you've got rheumatoid arthritis and you've got huge costs from a pharmaceutical standpoint, you're going to be subject to what the federal government says you can use. This has gone way, way too far. And if they're successful in this, if we allow this as a society to happen, if they're successful in this, then it's just who's next. It's just who's next. And I promise you that you all are in their crosshairs because you've got a big line item. You've got a big line item. And so what we need to do, we're pushing back as hard as we can on this, but we need help. So all of you, if you can help us educate your member of Congress and your United States Senator about the damage of CMMI, it ought to go away. We push for repeal of the whole doggone thing. It's not to say we don't believe in appropriate regulation, reasonable regulation. It's not that the government doesn't have a role in all of this because they're paying for a lot of it. But at the end of the day, these decisions, clinical care decisions, need to be between patients and families and doctors and their providers and nobody else. That's who cares about patients. And then finally, one final word on fee-for-service medicine or fee-for-service care. The nation has kind of bought into this in a very veneer way, a superficial way, that, and there are folks in Washington who are pushing this, that all of healthcare for all of us needs to be run through this massive process of integrated care, value-based purchasing, whatever the latest buzzword is, so that every single incident of care has to go through the federal government in some way. This is so that they can make those numbers add up, but so they can control it. This is a very, very dangerous place to be. I believe strongly that fee-for-service medicine, fee-for-service healthcare, the ability for one free American to identify another free American who has a service or a product that they desire and to contract independently outside of the realm of government control is absolutely vital for quality health care in this country. In fact, I think it's the only thing that is going to save quality health care in this country, because then you've got an outlet. You've got an outlet for folks to be able to get the care that they need. Fee-for-service medicine, certainly on the Democrat side of the aisle, has taken a huge hit, and I don't know if it has a single supporter over there. On the Republican side of the aisle, we're not doing a whole lot better. People give it lip service, but they don't, and they aren't pushing. They're pushing to make certain that it survives. So much so, and I've told this story to some of you, so much so, and I'll close with this. Sylvia Burwell was, I'm sorry, not Sylvia Burwell, but the gal before her, Sebelius. Sebelius was before our committee a couple of years ago, and I'm on Ways and Means Committee and the Health Subcommittee, and I was probably 6th or 7th in line to ask questions at this hearing. And so, in those hearings, the obvious questions are asked right away. And so it's, if you're not the first person or the second person, then the big ticket items are asked right away. So you got to figure out what you're gonna ask. Well, I was getting irritated with Ms. Sebelius, Secretary Sebelius, as it marched down the line. And so I asked her, just what I explained to you was important about fee-for-service medicine. I said, do you believe that that it ought to be legal for one free American who desires a service to purchase from another free American who can provide that service through education and training, that they can contract outside of government authority and control? There's this long pause. This is the Secretary of Health and Human Services in the United States of America. This long pause, and she says, I'll have to get back to you on that. That's where we are. That's where we are, folks. These are people who believe that decisions about what you can do for your patients, for your customers, for your clients, to allow them to have the highest quality of life possible, ought to be run by necessity through Washington, D.C. I'm here to tell you that I'm not going to lie down or stand for any of that. So thank you for your support. God bless you, and keep fighting hard. Thank you.
You have great clarity on this matter. When will your colleagues have this level of clarity?
Y'all heard question. When does everybody else wake up? when you and I and your patients speak with such a volume and such clarity and in such numbers that people are forced to wake up. Now you think about Jim McGovern, who's here from Massachusetts. You think about Jim McGovern signing on to this push act. This is a guy who has not been engaged in healthcare significantly. It's a fellow who, by and large, believes that the government knows best. I think he would actually admit that himself. But a fellow who has been challenged because of what's happened in Nantucket and happened in Massachusetts in this arena. And so he didn't just sign on to the bill. He came to our office and said, we want to help you in any way that we can. So we need those converts all across Congress. And that just requires constant communication and education with the members of Congress in the United States Senate. So the job's all of ours. We strategized. You all do a great job, Jay, and the gang. You do a great job. We've strategized beforehand about who it is that needs to be talked to, who needs to be visited. We're doing some work in Michigan with some folks to make certain that the right messages are becoming clear to the right people, so that we hopefully get something in the lame duck on competitive bidding. It's a communication process. These folks are not going to wake up one morning and have an epiphany without you explaining it to them and helping them get to that epiphany.
What do you think is the achievable agenda for reforming or delaying the law retroactively the rollout of national bidding expansion? And do you think it can be achieved in this lame duck session?
I think there is a significant possibility that we could get a year's delay from January 1 through the end of 2017. And I think I think having it be retroactive is probably more challenging. But I think we've got a great chance. But it's going to take communication from all of you to all of your representatives.
Kind of to dovetail on that, who would be the 2, 3, 5 main people that you need to really have that communication with?
Since I don't know who's in the room, let me take that question offline. I'm happy to be very, very candid in appropriate settings. That's one right here.
Congressman, we're in North Carolina. In the wake of Matthew, we delivered over 1,000 tanks in 2 days. All that's completely unreimbursable. It's nothing we can bill for. These are our patients. This is overtime, and in talking with our peers here, we're realizing that in another year, if that hurricane comes through, they're on their own because we can't afford that. But how do we address that? Because Congress only sees us as a box product provider, not a surgeon.
Yeah, again, it's that education process, but you think about, we don't say enough. HME industry doesn't say enough. What you do for folks. I don't know. I'm kind of talking about something I don't have a clue about, but I don't know what kind of press you got or what kind of coverage you got on what you all did to save lives during Matthew, but that ought to be a front page story for weeks in the local communities that you serve. We ought to need a press outreach, communications outreach to the local newspapers in North Carolina about that, and about you all do all these things all the time. You provide free services to folks all the time because they're your customers, they're your patients, they're your neighbors. Which is what Washington doesn't have a clue about. But to get that message out over and over and over and over again so that people know, patients know, Americans know who their friends are in this debate. Because if you hear the other folks tell it, they will say, greedy folks. They're just out there trying to make a buck. And you and I both know that is the last thing on your mind. It was the last thing on my mind when I took care of my patients. It's the last thing on the mind of the vast majority of folks caring for people across this way. And so that story's got to get out. What was the study? 88% covers 88% of the cost of providing the care. Now the physicians are at fault. You can blame docs for allowing this to continue as long as it has, because we, the physician community, have taken less than the cost of providing the care for decades out of the federal government. And so the federal government has gotten in this mode of thinking, well, shoot, if the docs can do it, then anybody else can do it, because you must be hiding something. You know, you're in business, so you got to be hiding something somewhere. You've got margins that you're not telling about. You're just not. It's just not disclosed. You know, you're not paying the taxes that you ought to pay. Blah 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 blah. Right. So when any system is set up to provide care for people that isn't covering the cost of the service of that care, what's going to happen? That care won't last. It can't last. And so to have that as the policy of the federal government just breaks me. And we ought to be, we need to continue to be shouting from the rooftops on this. Engaging your patients. We've talked about engaging your patients and your customers in the past. And handing them a piece of paper that says, this is who you call. We'll get you those names, by the way. This is who you call. This is their number. This is their local number. This is where their office is. This is who you visit. And tell them that you're not getting the care that you need, that you paid for, that you expect, that we deserve in a free society. I'm sorry, I don't do more.
I come from South Dakota, so we're fortunate to work with Senator John Thune, and he's been a good advocate for us. But in our area, we're not competitive bid, but we're still affected by the reimbursement.
Right.
And so what we're finding is that we have to build so many things non-assigned that it's really affecting us less than it's affecting the patient. Because now they have to make up the difference between what they're reimbursed and what we're billing. So, from that perspective, it's really detrimental to the patients out there. And their fixed income,
Yep.
but they have to pay for those difference.
Yeah, this is really an important point, because we need to make certain that the ire, the anger of that patient isn't directed at you. And so often what happens when you say, well, I'm sorry, I can't do it for X because it costs X plus Y, it costs me, you, X plus Y, and therefore I've got to can only do this through cash arrangement. And then the patient sees you as the bad guy. The education process is not just for those of us who are assisting in these policy decisions. The education process is imperative for those patients to say, this is what I must do because the federal government is making me do this. And then we've got to connect those dots for folks back home, because otherwise that we don't have the chorus of voices that have to be yelling at us and their representatives as loudly as needs to occur for this policy to change. Okay, I'm going to do one thing that my staff hates, and that's give you my personal email. If you've got stories, I want to hear them. If you've got challenges that you're not that come about in the future that you aren't interested in sharing publicly, I want to hear them. If you've got citations that I can provide for folks, and we'll do all the taking out of the personal identifying information on and on and on. But I need to know your worst challenge, and as it relates to a patient. And I'm just Tom Price, TOMPRICE at MindSpring, MINDSPRING.com. Tom Price at MindSpring.com. And I mean that sincerely. When I'm in front of when we call those folks before our committee, and I've got an opportunity, I get 5 minutes. And so what my challenge in those 5 minutes is to be able to affect people's perspective on this issue and to make it so there's a story that can be told from those 5 minutes. And sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not, but when we're most successful, it's because I'm sharing a personal story of somebody somewhere. And I don't need to use names and I don't necessarily need to use places, but I need those personal stories. I can make them up, but then I've got to say to folks, I just made that up. I think that's what's happening. When you tell me what's really happening, then I can say that with all honesty and sincerity. This is what's happening out there. This is somebody who died because of this federal government program. This is somebody who didn't get the treatment that they would have gotten in any other industrialized country, any other country on the face of the earth that has quality of care, medical care. And we're not getting it here because of the federal program. And we're happy to be your mouthpiece on this. I mean that sincerely. Y'all are wonderful. God bless you. Take care. Thank you.